A Navy SEAL, Caleb Mercer, never expected a routine mission in the mountains of West Virginia to take such an unexpected turn. Out of the spring woods of Monongahela National Forest came a tiny German Shepherd puppy, small, shivering, far too young to be alone in a place like this. At first, Caleb thought it was lost, but when the puppy grabbed his pant leg and refused to let go, he knew something wasn't right. The little dog wanted him to follow, far beyond the mission he had been sent to complete, and before the day was over, Caleb would discover that some of the biggest acts of courage can come from the smallest places. Before we begin, tell us what city you're watching from today. We'd love to know how far this story travels. April had come softly to Monongahela National Forest, though winter still held the higher ridges with a cold hand. Meltwater ran beneath the roots of maple and hemlock, turning the narrow animal paths slick and dark. Fog rested low in the hollows, drifting between tree trunks like breath from the mountains themselves. Every few minutes, water dropped from the branches and struck the leaves below with a patient ticking sound. Navy SEAL Caleb Mercer moved alone along the slope. At 38, Caleb carried himself with the quiet control of a man trained to conserve motion. His camouflage field uniform was damp at the shoulders from the low branches, and a compact receiver rested against his chest rig, blinking with the weak remains of a signal. He had been inserted before sunrise to recover a Navy test UAV that had gone down somewhere in the forest during a contractor evaluation flight. The assignment was clear: find the aircraft, secure the experimental sensor package, report extraction coordinates. The UAV had lost contact late the previous afternoon after crossing a section of rough terrain near the western ridgeline. According to the briefing, weather interference and terrain masking were the most likely causes. The device carried prototype software and imaging components that the Navy did not want sitting unattended in miles of public forest. On paper, it was a recovery mission. Out here, paper meant very little. Monongahela was too large, too folded, too old to give up anything easily. A ravine could swallow a signal. A slope could hide wreckage beneath laurel and wet leaves. A person could walk within 20 yards of what he was searching for and still pass it by. Caleb slowed near a fallen white oak and checked the receiver again. The signal flickered, weak, then steadier. He adjusted his path, climbing around the base of the ridge where moss-covered stones broke through the soil. The forest around him carried the morning in small pieces. A crow somewhere above the canopy, the distant push of water over rocks, the low scrape of branches moving against one another. Then something shifted in the brush ahead. Caleb stopped. The sound had been small, hardly more than leaves disturbed near the ground. Still, it arrived from the wrong direction and at the wrong rhythm. His hand lowered toward the utility knife fixed at his belt, while his eyes measured the undergrowth in front of him. Wind came from his left. Cover sat 10 yards behind him. The slope dropped hard to his right. He watched the brush without blinking. In these mountains, a black bear could move with surprising quiet, and a wounded animal could become unpredictable before a person had time to regret getting too close. Caleb had no interest in startling anything with claws, teeth, or panic. The leaves stirred again. A thin branch trembled. Then a tiny shape pushed through the mountain laurel and stepped into the open. Caleb's hand eased away from his belt. A German Shepherd puppy stood among the wet leaves, so small the forest seemed too large around it. Its paws looked oversized, its body unsteady, and its ears had not yet decided whether to stand or fold. Mud clung to its legs and belly, and the little animal trembled as if each breath took effort. For several seconds, Caleb simply looked at it. The puppy looked back. "Well," he said quietly, "you're a long way from anybody's porch." His voice barely disturbed the air. The puppy took one careful step forward, then another. It stopped, lowered its head, and seemed to study him with a seriousness far too old for its size. Caleb crouched slowly, keeping his movements open and calm. "Easy, little guy." The puppy came closer. By the time it reached his boot, its front legs shook hard enough to make its shoulders quiver. Caleb took the water bottle from his pack, poured a little into the cap, and set it on a flat stone. The puppy sniffed once, then drank with small, focused laps. Caleb waited. The woods waited with him. When the cap was empty, he poured a little more. The puppy drank that too, then lifted its head and looked past him toward the deeper trees. The movement was quick, sharp, and oddly deliberate. Caleb followed its gaze but saw only wet trunks, laurel, and the gray-green dimness of early spring. He broke a piece from a protein bar and placed it beside the stone. The puppy sniffed the food, ate once, paused. Its head turned again toward the same direction. Caleb noticed. The little dog returned to the food, chewed through another small bite, and then stepped away before it had finished. It walked a few yards into the leaves, stopped near a thin sapling, and turned back to him. Waiting. Caleb stayed crouched. The puppy came back, touched its nose to his boot, then returned to the same spot. Waiting again. The pattern repeated. Short walk. Look back. Return. Nudge. Caleb's expression changed slowly. He had seen scared animals cling to people. He had seen hungry strays forget caution the moment food appeared. This felt different, quieter, and more focused, as if the puppy had spent the last bit of its strength reaching the only person it could find. He picked up the remaining piece of protein bar and held it near the puppy's mouth. "Eat first," he murmured. "Then we'll figure out what you want." The puppy took the food, chewed twice, and turned toward the forest again before swallowing. Caleb looked in the same direction. Nothing moved, nothing called, yet the small animal's attention stayed fixed there, pulled by something Caleb could neither see nor hear. He leaned closer and brushed a bit of mud away from the puppy's eye with his thumb. The fur beneath was matted, and a faint scent clung to it beneath the dirt and wet leaves. Smoke, maybe. Diesel too, thin enough to miss if he had been in a hurry. Caleb went still. That smell did not belong on a 5-week-old puppy wandering alone in protected forest. The receiver on his chest gave a soft pulse. The UAV signal was still alive. So was the question standing at his boots. The puppy suddenly caught the cuff of his pants between its tiny teeth and pulled. Caleb looked down. The pull was weak but determined. A second later, the puppy released him, walked toward the deeper trees, and stopped again. It waited there with its head turned, one paw lifted slightly from the wet ground. For most of the morning, Caleb's world had been reduced to coordinates, signal strength, and the missing equipment he had been sent to recover. Then the forest placed something living in his path, and living things had a way of changing the order of a mission. Caleb stood, slipped the receiver back into place, and took one step toward the puppy. The little dog turned immediately. This time it did not come back. It began leading him into the trees. Before we see where the little puppy is leading Caleb, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. The puppy moved quickly once Caleb started following. Its small body slipped through the undergrowth with surprising confidence, weaving between fallen branches and moss-covered rocks as if it had traveled the route many times before. Every few minutes it would stop, glance over its shoulder, and wait for Caleb to catch up. Then it would continue. The forest gradually changed around them. The terrain became steeper, the trees grew denser. Sunlight struggled to reach the forest floor beneath the thick canopy overhead. Several times Caleb checked the receiver clipped to his gear, making sure he wasn't straying too far from the UAV search area. The signal remained weak, still somewhere nearby, yet the puppy never hesitated. For nearly 40 minutes they continued deeper into the mountains. Then Caleb noticed something familiar. An old gravel track emerged between the trees. Most people would have walked past it without a second glance. Years of weather and neglect had allowed leaves, moss, and brush to reclaim much of its surface. In some places, young saplings were already pushing through cracks in the gravel. Caleb stopped. He knew this road. 8 years earlier, during a survival and land navigation course, instructors had briefly mentioned an abandoned fire access route hidden within this section of Monongahela. A fire road, built decades ago, rarely used anymore, almost invisible to visitors. The puppy trotted onto the road without slowing. Caleb followed. The farther they traveled, the more details began to stand out. A section of crushed brush beside the road. Fresh, a piece of black plastic lodged beneath a rock, recently broken. Several yards later, Caleb spotted tire impressions pressed deep into soft mud. Large tires, not old. The edges remained sharp despite the rain. He crouched beside the tracks. The vehicle had passed through within the last day. Possibly less. A cool breeze drifted through the trees. Along with it came another scent, oil, faint but present. The road ahead curved around a hillside and disappeared from view. For the first time, Caleb found himself thinking less about the missing UAV and more about the trail unfolding in front of him. The puppy seemed to sense the change. Its pace slowed, its ears lifted, its attention sharpened. Whatever had drawn it this far appeared to be close. The forest grew quiet again. Even the birds seemed absent. Several hundred yards later, the road opened into a small clearing. Caleb stopped immediately. A pickup truck sat partially off the road near a shallow ditch. The front end had struck a large boulder. One headlight was shattered. The hood carried fresh damage. Steam no longer rose from the engine, but the vehicle hadn't been sitting there long. The puppy ran toward it. Caleb followed carefully. Military training encouraged caution around unknown scenes. People often focused on what they could see. Experience taught him to pay equal attention to what was missing. He approached from the driver's side. The door stood open. The key remained in the ignition. The engine was off. The airbag had never deployed. Caleb studied the damage again. The collision appeared minor, too minor. He circled the vehicle slowly. No blood, no obvious signs of a medical emergency. No indication that someone had suffered a serious impact. Yet nobody was there. Something felt wrong. The deeper Caleb looked, the more questions appeared. Near the driver's door, he found part of a broken camera strap hanging from a metal bracket. The torn edge looked recent. A few feet away, disturbed mud covered part of the roadside. Rain had softened many details, but several marks remained visible. Something heavy had moved through the area, or someone. Caleb remained crouched for several seconds, studying, comparing, thinking. The scene refused to fit together cleanly. A pickup with limited damage, a missing driver, broken equipment, signs of activity after the crash. The pieces belonged together. He simply couldn't see the full picture yet. The puppy whined softly. Caleb looked toward the cab. "Let's see what you know." Inside, the truck carried the familiar signs of someone who spent long days outdoors: maps, work gloves, field notebooks. A half-empty coffee thermos secured between the seats. On the passenger side sat a framed photograph. Caleb picked it up. A young woman wearing a forest ranger uniform sat on the wooden steps of a ranger station. She couldn't have been much older than 30. Across her lap rested a tiny German Shepherd puppy inside a woven basket. The resemblance was impossible to miss. The same markings. The same oversized ears, the same intelligent eyes. Caleb looked down at the puppy beside the truck, then back at the photograph. The little dog stared at the image. For several seconds it didn't move. The silence carried more weight than any explanation. A connection existed. That much was obvious. Everything else remained unclear. The truck answered one question. It created several more. Caleb carefully returned the photograph to its place. The puppy suddenly froze. Its ears snapped upright. Every muscle in its body tightened. Caleb saw the reaction immediately. Years of working alongside military K-9 teams had taught him to trust certain instincts. Animals often notice danger long before people did. The puppy turned toward the road. Listening, waiting. Caleb listened too. At first he heard nothing. Only wind, only leaves, only distance. Then the sound arrived. Faint, mechanical, an engine. Still far away, growing louder, the puppy moved closer to him. Caleb's expression hardened. A vehicle was approaching. Out here. On a road almost nobody used. That alone was enough. Without hesitation, he scooped up the puppy and slipped into a dense patch of brush, overlooking the clearing. Branches closed around them as he settled into concealment and watched the road through a narrow opening. The engine grew louder. Then a dark pickup rounded the bend. It rolled to a stop beside the damaged truck. Two men climbed out. Both appeared irritated. Neither looked surprised to find the vehicle there. Caleb remained perfectly still. The puppy stayed silent against his chest. One of the men kicked a loose stone across the road. "I told you, we should have searched it better the first time." The second man slammed the truck door. "We searched it, then where is it?" The first man looked toward the damaged pickup. "Because if she hid that card somewhere in there and somebody finds it before we do, we're all gonna have a problem." Caleb's attention sharpened. Card, hidden, she. The conversation continued as the two men began checking the vehicle. Fragments drifted through the clearing. mentions of footage, mentions of dumping sites, mentions of someone who was still being held until they recovered what she had recorded. The details remained incomplete, but the meaning was becoming clear. This was no accident, and whatever had happened on this road had started long before Caleb arrived. The two men continued searching, unaware that someone was listening, unaware that a frightened puppy had already brought help. The two men remained at the damaged pickup for less than 15 minutes. It felt longer. Caleb stayed motionless inside the brush, while fragments of their conversation drifted through the clearing. The puppy remained pressed against his chest, surprisingly quiet despite its age. Eventually, the search ended. Neither man looked satisfied. One slammed the driver's door hard enough to shake the vehicle. The other scanned the surrounding woods one final time. Then they climbed back into their truck and drove away. The sound of the engine faded slowly through the mountains. Only after the forest settled into silence again did Caleb move. He waited another full minute, then another. Old habits. Good habits. When he finally emerged from concealment, the puppy immediately jumped from his arms and trotted toward the road. Caleb watched the direction the truck had disappeared. The situation had changed, significantly. The missing UAV remained important. The Navy would still want its equipment recovered. But now there was evidence suggesting a civilian had been taken against her will. And, whatever those men were protecting, appeared serious enough to make them return to a crash site in search of hidden evidence. Some missions expanded. This one had just done exactly that. Caleb stepped away from the truck and activated his secure radio. The transmission lasted less than 2 minutes. He reported the crash scene, the suspicious conversation, the possibility of an unlawful detention, the location coordinates, the photograph, the damaged equipment. His command acknowledged the update and instructed him to continue gathering information while maintaining operational discretion until additional resources could be coordinated. The response was calm, professional, expected. When the transmission ended, Caleb slipped the radio away and looked down at the puppy. "Looks like we're still working together." The puppy tilted its head. For a brief moment, Caleb almost laughed. Then the little dog turned toward the road again. Business resumed. The next stretch of travel felt different. The puppy moved with greater urgency than before, occasionally lowering its nose to the ground before continuing ahead. Caleb followed the tire tracks left by the departing truck whenever they appeared in soft sections of mud. Fresh oil stains showed up occasionally along the route. Small, easy to miss. The sort of details most people would never notice while driving through the mountains. The forest gradually began to change again. The trees grew thinner, the terrain opened. Signs of old industrial activity started appearing among the vegetation. Pieces of rusted pipe, collapsed fencing, concrete foundations hidden beneath vines, a weathered warning sign half buried in brush. Most of the lettering had disappeared years ago. The remaining words were barely readable. "Offers personal only." The puppy stopped beside the sign, its ears lifted, its attention sharpened. Something lay ahead. The road curved around a ridge before descending into a shallow valley. Caleb slowed immediately. Then he saw it. An abandoned coal facility. At least that was how it appeared at first glance. Several old structures sat scattered across the property. Rust covered many surfaces. Broken windows reflected dull afternoon light. Weeds pushed through cracked pavement. Time seemed to have forgotten the place. Yet something felt wrong, very wrong. Caleb settled behind a cluster of brush overlooking the valley floor and studied the area through binoculars. The first clue appeared near the main building, a security camera, modern. The second clue sat behind one of the warehouses, a generator recently installed. The third clue moved across the property, a tanker truck, clean, operational, very much in use. The abandoned facility suddenly looked far less abandoned. Caleb continued observing. Vehicles came and went. Workers carried clipboards. Forklifts moved containers between buildings. None of it matched the appearance presented to the outside world. Someone wanted this place ignored. Someone had invested considerable effort into making sure people stayed away. The puppy lay quietly beside him, watching, waiting. The afternoon passed in careful observation. Caleb recorded photographs, logged vehicle descriptions, estimated personnel numbers, identified possible entry points, studied elevated terrain that could provide overwatch positions, marked potential escape routes. His notebook slowly filled with information. A complete picture emerged, one detail at a time. The facility operated as a transfer point. Trucks arrived, containers moved, vehicles departed. Several conversations overheard through periods of observation filled in additional gaps. Mentions of disposal schedules, mentions of shipment weights, mentions of locations deeper in the mountains. Caleb began connecting the pieces. Industrial waste, chemical waste, materials expensive to dispose of legally. Instead of paying for proper treatment, someone was transporting the waste here. From here, it disappeared. The surrounding terrain offered countless opportunities. Remote ravines, abandoned mining cuts, deep drainage channels, hidden watercourses, places few people ever visited, places where pollution could remain unnoticed for years. A creek flowed along the far edge of the valley. Its water looked normal from a distance. That thought bothered Caleb more than he expected. Communities existed downstream from these mountains. Families, farms, small towns. Water traveled farther than most people realized. The realization settled heavily. No speech was necessary. The facts spoke for themselves. For nearly an hour, nothing significant changed. Then Caleb spotted two armed guards near the main entrance. Unlike the workers, these men remained stationary, watching, monitoring, controlling access. Their position blocked the most practical route into the facility. Caleb studied them carefully. The puppy followed his gaze. For several seconds, neither moved. A solution slowly formed. The guards appeared alert, professional enough, but they were still human. Humans looked toward unexpected noise. Caleb leaned closer to the puppy. The little dog immediately focused on him. "See those two?" The puppy watched his face. Caleb pointed briefly, then toward a patch of brush farther from his own position. The puppy followed the motion, watching, processing. Caleb repeated the gesture. Once, twice. The little dog's ears twitched. Something remarkable happened. The puppy seemed to understand. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough. Caleb waited until both guards looked away. Then he pointed one final time. The puppy slipped into the brush. 30 seconds later, a series of sharp barks erupted from the opposite side of the entrance. The reaction was immediate. Both guards turned. One cursed, the other grabbed a flashlight. Moments later, they moved toward the sound. Exactly as Caleb had hoped. Some opportunities arrived unexpectedly. This one arrived on 4 paws. Caleb crossed the distance quickly. By the time the guards realized the puppy was no longer where they expected, Caleb was already behind them. The encounter lasted only seconds. No gunfire, no unnecessary violence. 2 surprised men found themselves quietly restrained and unable to raise an alarm. The facility remained unaware. The valley remained silent. Several minutes later, the puppy returned. Its tail moved cautiously. Its breathing remained steady. Caleb looked at the little dog for a long moment. The animal sat beside him, waiting for the next instruction. For the first time since meeting it, Caleb saw something beyond desperation and loyalty. He saw potential, and that realization stayed with him as he turned his attention toward the facility hidden beneath the mountains. The 2 guards remained secured where Caleb had left them. The rest of the facility continued operating as if nothing had happened. Forklifts moved between buildings. Engines rumbled somewhere beyond the warehouses. A generator hummed steadily in the background, blending into the constant sounds of machinery and industry. The perfect cover. Caleb waited several minutes, studying the patterns of movement around the property. Workers followed routines. Vehicles followed schedules. People became predictable when they believed they were safe. The puppy stayed hidden beside a stack of weathered pallets near the perimeter fence. Its eyes never left Caleb as he prepared to move deeper into the facility. "Stay." The puppy sat immediately. Caleb gave a small nod, then disappeared into the shadows between the buildings. The deeper he moved into the old mining complex, the more evidence he found. Fresh tire marks crossed sections of cracked concrete. Chemical containers stood stacked inside former maintenance buildings. Several storage areas carried warning labels that had been partially removed. Someone had invested significant effort in hiding what this place really was. Yet hiding something and erasing it were two different things. A narrow service corridor led toward the oldest section of the facility. The buildings here looked different, older, more isolated. Less active, Caleb slowed. A single guard sat outside one doorway, absorbed in his phone. The man never saw Caleb approach. Seconds later, he was quietly restrained and left unable to raise an alarm. The hallway beyond smelled of dust, rust, and damp concrete. A flickering light hung overhead. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Then Caleb heard a voice, a woman, faint, tired, but unmistakably human. He followed the sound to a locked storage room. The lock offered little resistance. The door opened. Inside, a young woman looked up from a metal chair. For a moment, neither spoke. Relief appeared first, then caution, then disbelief. The woman stood slowly. "Who are you?" "Chief Petty Officer Caleb Mercer, United States Navy." Her shoulders lowered slightly. "Not completely, just enough." "My name is Aaron Holloway." The name settled into place. The woman from the photograph. The owner of the pickup. The person the criminals had been searching for. Aaron looked exhausted. Dirt stained her uniform. A bruise darkened one side of her face, and her wrists carried faint marks from restraints that had recently been removed. Still, her eyes remained sharp, focused, determined. Caleb appreciated that immediately. "We need to move," he said quietly. Aaron nodded. "I know." Then she surprised him. "They didn't find the memory card." Caleb paused. Aaron continued. "I knew they were following me. I hid it before they caught me." Her voice remained steady despite everything she had endured. "I'd been documenting illegal dumping sites for months. Trail cameras, timestamps, vehicle plates, transfer schedules. The pieces were finally beginning to connect. The pickup." Aaron nodded. "The card's still there." For a second, neither spoke. The silence carried its own weight. Outside the room, engines continued running. Inside, the entire investigation suddenly had a center: the evidence. Without it, the operation might survive. With it, everything could collapse. For several months, Aaron had been trying to expose what was happening inside the mountains she had sworn to protect. The more she discovered, the larger the operation became. Contractors, haulers, disposal crews, entire sections of forest quietly treated as dumping grounds. Some creeks had already begun showing signs of contamination. Fish populations had declined. Water samples had raised concerns. Nothing had been proven yet. The memory card changed that. Caleb looked toward the hallway. "We leave now." Aaron nodded. No argument, no hesitation. The path out seemed straightforward at first. A rear maintenance corridor connected to several unused storage areas before leading toward an exterior access point. Caleb moved ahead while Aaron followed several steps behind. The facility remained busy. Busy was useful. Busy created distractions. For several minutes, everything went according to plan. Then reality intervened. They entered an old storage warehouse filled with abandoned equipment from the mining days. Dust-coated steel shelves. Rusted pipes leaned against concrete walls. Broken machinery sat beneath tarps that had not been moved in years. Aaron carefully stepped around a stack of metal tubing. One pipe shifted, another rolled. Then an entire rack shuddered. The crash echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Metal struck concrete. Once, twice, then again. Both froze. The sound seemed to travel forever. Caleb closed his eyes briefly, not from frustration. From calculation. Voices appeared almost immediately. 3 men. Close. Very close. A flashlight beam swept across the far end of the warehouse. "Did you hear that? Check it." The distance between them shrank quickly. Caleb guided Aaron behind a row of large industrial tanks. The space offered concealment, but little else. The warehouse walls boxed them in. The nearest exit sat directly beyond the approaching guards. The options disappeared one by one. A flashlight beam moved across the floor. Closer, another followed. The men continued advancing. Every second narrowed the gap. For the first time since entering the facility, Caleb could see genuine concern in Aaron's eyes. Not fear for herself, fear for what would happen to the evidence if they failed. The guards reached the next row, then the next. The warehouse grew quieter with every step they took. The outcome seemed to be moving in only one direction. But moments of certainty can be deceptive. A sudden bark exploded from the opposite side of the building. One bark, then another, then a rapid series of sharp, excited yelps. All three guards stopped. What the hell was that? The barking continued. Further away now, moving. One guard groaned. That stupid dog again. The second guard pointed toward the sound. Go, before it gets into the storage yard. The flashlight beams turned. The men changed direction. Within seconds, they were moving away from Caleb and Aaron instead of toward them. The barking continued to draw them deeper into the facility. Only when the voices disappeared did either person breathe normally again. Neither spoke, neither needed to. The relief said enough. Caleb looked toward Aaron. Let's move. This time they reached the exterior fence line without incident. The moment they stepped beyond the facility perimeter, a small shape burst from the trees. The puppy ran straight toward them. Toward Aaron. She dropped to her knees. The little dog launched itself into her arms. For several seconds, all Caleb heard was the rustle of leaves and the quiet sound of Aaron trying unsuccessfully to hold back tears. Brisk. The name emerged almost as a whisper. The puppy immediately licked her chin. Its tail moved so hard that its entire body seemed to wag with it. Caleb smiled. So that's your name. Aaron buried her face briefly against the puppy's neck. Several moments passed before she finally looked up. I found him near the ranger station about 4 weeks ago. Her hand gently scratched behind one ear. Someone left him in a basket beside the access road. Brisk pressed closer. He started following me everywhere after that. Patrols, inspections, search routes. The puppy looked completely content now, as if the hardest part of the day was finally over. Caleb sat beside them. He found me miles from here. Aaron looked up. Caleb told her about the forest, the water, the truck, the photograph, the fire road, every step, every mile, every decision. As the story unfolded, Aaron's eyes drifted back toward Brisk. Understanding slowly replaced confusion, then gratitude, then something deeper. The little dog had not run away to save himself. He had gone looking for help, and somehow, against impossible odds, he had found exactly the person she needed. The mountains were quiet by the time Caleb made his next report. Night had settled across Monongahela National Forest. The ridgelines had faded into darkness, and a cold wind moved through the trees above the temporary observation point where he, Aaron, and Brisk waited. The rescue was over. The larger operation was only beginning. Using the photographs, coordinates, vehicle descriptions, and personnel estimates Caleb had gathered, multiple agencies began building a response. Navy Command shared information through appropriate channels. State investigators became involved. Environmental enforcement teams joined the effort. Local law enforcement and Forest Service personnel coordinated with federal authorities. Hours later, vehicles began moving. Carefully, quietly, methodically. The old coal facility that had hidden in the mountains for years suddenly found itself surrounded by people who knew exactly where to look. Some operations end with noise. This one ended with evidence. The memory card hidden inside Aaron's pickup became the turning point. Investigators recovered it the following morning. The footage showed trucks arriving at remote locations throughout the forest. Timestamps connected vehicles to specific dumping sites. GPS data linked routes, schedules, and operators. License plates appeared clearly in several recordings. Piece by piece, the picture expanded. Then expanded again. The illegal operation reached far beyond a single facility. Companies that had paid to avoid proper disposal costs came under investigation. Contractors who transported hazardous waste faced charges. Financial records connected individuals who had assumed the mountains would keep their secrets buried forever. The mountains had done the opposite. They had preserved the evidence. In the months that followed, crews inspected streams, springs, and drainage systems throughout the region. Water samples were collected. Contaminated areas were identified. Restoration projects began in several affected locations. The work would take time. Years in some cases. But it had started, and that mattered. Several days later, Aaron stood beside Caleb at the edge of another ridgeline. The bruises on her face had begun to fade. Her energy had returned. The determination that had carried her through months of investigations seemed stronger than ever. Brisk stood between them. His tail swept steadily across the grass. "You still haven't found your drone?" Aaron asked. Caleb smiled. "Hard to find something that doesn't want to be found." Aaron laughed softly. For the first time since they'd met, the sound carried no tension, only relief. The missing UAV had never stopped transmitting entirely. The signal remained weak and inconsistent, but it still appeared occasionally on Caleb's receiver. With the immediate crisis over, recovering the aircraft once again became the mission. This time he wasn't searching alone. Aaron knew the terrain better than almost anyone, and Brisk seemed determined to participate in everything. The three of them spent the next several days moving through sections of forest few visitors ever saw. They crossed old logging routes, climbed rocky slopes, and followed narrow game trails winding through the mountains. Spring continued arriving around them. Dogwood blossoms appeared along lower elevations. Streams ran clear beneath sunlight that had been absent only weeks earlier. Birds returned to areas that had remained silent during winter. The forest felt different, lighter somehow. One afternoon, Brisk suddenly stopped near a steep hillside covered in fallen timber. His ears lifted. His nose worked the air. Then he moved uphill. Caleb exchanged a glance with Aaron before following. A few minutes later, they found the UAV lodged between two large rocks beneath a fallen tree. The aircraft carried visible damage, but it was there, mission complete. Aaron grinned. Brisk barked once. Caleb shook his head. "I think he wants credit." Brisk barked again. This time Aaron laughed. The sound echoed across the hillside. As they began preparing the UAV for recovery, Caleb found himself studying the puppy. Not for the first time, and not for the reasons most people might assume. Brisk clearly possessed a strong nose. Many dogs did. He learned commands quickly. Other dogs could do that too. Yet Caleb's thoughts kept returning to moments that had nothing to do with training exercises. Some qualities couldn't be measured by a stopwatch. Some couldn't be listed on a report. Brisk had crossed miles of rugged mountain terrain while barely more than a baby. He had remembered the location of the crash site. He had recognized danger before Caleb heard the approaching vehicle. He had remained hidden when asked. He had learned simple instructions after only a few repetitions. Most importantly, he had done something far rarer. He had gone back. Back toward the place that frightened him. Back toward the people who had taken Aaron. Back toward danger. Not because someone ordered him to. Because someone he cared about needed help. Caleb had spent years around working dogs. That difference mattered. Talent could be developed. Instinct could be refined. Skill could be taught. Character was harder to find. A week later, the three of them stood outside a ranger station overlooking the forest. Brisk lay stretched across the wooden porch, half asleep beneath the afternoon sun. Caleb looked toward Aaron. "When he's old enough, have you ever thought about having him evaluated?" Aaron glanced down at the puppy. "For canine work?" Caleb nodded. "He has potential." Brisk opened one eye, as if he knew the conversation involved him. Aaron smiled. "I think he'd like that." The decision wasn't immediate. There would be time, training, assessments, growth. But the idea remained, and eventually it became reality. 6 months later, Brisk entered an early evaluation program designed to identify young dogs with exceptional working potential. Trainers noted his focus, his adaptability, his willingness to learn. They also noticed something harder to describe: confidence, the kind that remained steady when situations became uncertain. Years passed. Brisk grew. Training became service. Service became reputation. Among forest rangers, search teams, and conservation officers throughout the region, stories about the German Shepherd spread quietly from one station to another. Some remembered his tracking ability. Others remembered successful searches. A few remembered difficult rescues. But those who knew the full story remembered something else. A puppy, a basket, a ranger, a forest, and a journey that began when a frightened little dog refused to give up. On certain spring mornings, Aaron would still stand outside the ranger station with a cup of coffee and watch the sunlight move across the mountains. Brisk often sat beside her, older now, wiser, still alert. The forest looked peaceful from that porch. Streams continued flowing through the valleys below. New leaves appeared every April. Birds returned each year. Life moved forward in ways both large and small, and sometimes Erin would reach down and scratch behind Brisk's ears. The old dog would lean into her hand, then settle quietly beside her, as if reminding everyone who saw him that courage does not always arrive in a heroic form. Sometimes it arrives on oversized paws, carrying more heart than anyone expected. Before we wrap up, I want to mention something important. The events in this story are fictional, but the feelings behind them are very real. Most of us have known loyalty. Most of us have depended on someone at a difficult moment, and many of us have experienced the quiet comfort of knowing we weren't facing something alone. If this story brought back a memory for you, I'd love to hear about it. Maybe it was a dog, a friend, a family member, or someone who showed up when you needed help the most. Feel free to share your thoughts, memories, or prayers in the comments. And if you enjoy stories about ordinary people, resilience, and meaningful connections, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. You know, the older I get, the more I find myself remembering small moments instead of big ones. Not the headlines. Not the victories, the little things. A muddy paw print on a porch, a coffee cup cooling beside an early morning window, a familiar sound following you from room to room. The simple comfort of knowing someone is nearby. That's what stayed with me from this story. Not the investigation, not the arrests, just a tiny puppy crossing miles of forest because somebody he loved needed help. I think there are moments in life that remind us grace still finds its way into the world, often through places we'd never expect. Sometimes those moments arrive through people, sometimes through animals, sometimes through an ordinary day that quietly becomes unforgettable. And tonight, somewhere in my imagination, I can still picture a ranger station porch, a gentle spring breeze moving through the trees, and an old German shepherd resting peacefully beside someone who never forgot what he once did for her.